Well, just before we came on air, I spoke to the Prime Minister and I began by asking him whether his tax agreement was worth the paper it was written on.
No, it is worth a huge amount. I mean, one of the first steps you need is to have a proper register of beneficial ownership that's available to the tax authorities. It will be their first port of call to find out who owns what and to check up on tax evasion, tax avoidance, and also to prevent corruption leaching out of developing world countries where contracts might have been illegally paid for. So these are big, big steps forward. Would we like to go further? Is there more to do? Of course there is, but I think the Lochern Declaration on tax, on transparency, on trade, very simply set out saying we should know who owns what company, what they pay, where they pay it, a real step forward, and I pay tribute to the charities and the NGOs who campaigned for this so long.
But surely if we, the workers, we, the citizens, we, the voters, surely we have a right to be able to look at whatever we want in terms of who owns what and who pays what. This is simply for the tax inspector, and who's to know he'll ever find it?
Well, you say simply for the tax inspector. Look, the work that we've been doing in the run-up to this summit, getting our own house in order, getting the Crown dependencies and the overseas territories to join international tax exchange agreements, that has yielded billions of pounds for the British Exchequer. That's going to help me to keep taxes down on hard-working families. That's going to help this government to fund a good health service, to fund schools. So it really does matter to hard-working people.
Prime Minister, can I just turn then to Syria? Now, this programme has filmed with a British jihadi who was killed eventually in Syria on the battlefield with Syrian rebels. In the course of filming, we became aware of some 50 British jihadis in a battalion of 750 migrants. Does that fact in any way weaken your own personal resolve to see weapons going to the rebels which we would supply?
Well, let me be very clear. I've always known and have always had concerns about elements of the Syrian opposition. There are some who are extremists, and it is very worrying that people from Britain and from other countries with extremist views have gone to join them. Of course that is concerning, but we shouldn't accept what Assad wants us to accept, which is the only alternative to him is extremism and terrorism. The fact is there are millions of Syrians who want a free, democratic, pluralistic Syria that supports the rights of minorities, including Christians. And that is the view of the official Syrian opposition. They've signed statement after statement saying that is the Syria they want to build. And we should be on the side of those Syrians. We should not back Assad or want to keep him in power. He's brutalized and murdered his own people, including using chemical weapons. And of course, we should have no truck with elements of the opposition that are extremists and that are linked to Al-Qaeda. It's the Syrians who want democracy, peace and stability who we should back.
One thing is clear today, Prime Minister, isn't it, that you would very much like to have had the removal of Assad as part of today's declaration, and that hasn't happened because you couldn't persuade Mr. Putin.
No, that's not the case. I mean, look, the Russians have a long-standing view and have never signed an international document saying that Assad must go. But the fact is, what the Russians have signed is a statement that says very clearly there should be a transitional government in Syria, that government should have the support of all Syrian people. And to me, that is accepting that the future of Syria is going to be one without Assad. Now, I think that is an important step forward. Crucially, this transitional authority would have full control over the military and security services, so it's a transition worth fighting for, worth negotiating for, and I think that is an important step forward.
Quick final question, Prime Minister. 12 years after the Afghan war began, we're talking to the Taliban. It's not victory, is it?
Well, I think we can be very proud of what our armed forces have done. because Afghanistan was not only home to the Taliban, but was home to Al-Qaeda, was home to people who were plotting to kill and destroy people on our own streets. Now, I look very carefully at the security and intelligence information I'm given, and I'm told that whereas 90% of the plots facing Britain came from the Afghanistan-Pakistan area, that has now been radically reduced. That's been radically reduced because of the work of our troops. And I think it's right, although it's difficult, I think it's right that these conversations take place, because we should be trying to persuade elements of the Taliban, as many as possible, to give up an armed struggle and to take up a political struggle. After all, I'm standing here in Northern Ireland where we went through that same process ourselves. People who wanted to kill and maim British citizens then became part of a political process. And that is what we need in Afghanistan, but it doesn't in any way reduce from the security approach we have there of backing the Afghan National Security Forces, who increasingly are taking over security in that country.
Prime Minister, thank you very much indeed for joining us.